So welcome to the Communication Mastery Podcast with me, Mark Burlinson. This is where we unleash the power of understanding so we can build bridges, not boxes, because we understand that communication is the soil in which teamwork grows. Your business needs communication for your teams to thrive. And today we want to follow up on last time's really excellent episode with Jen Kavanaugh. There was a phrase that stuck out to me in our conversation where we said that consistency beats intensity. Too often we approach things with intensity, don't we? Just going to try harder and make it work. But actually the little things you do day by day, week by week, can often be more effective and more powerful than that intensity approach. Now, of course, I'm not talking about the kind of consistency where you sit in the fast lane and you drive 3 miles an hour under the speed limit. That's not consistency that we want to encourage. In fact, that's the kind of consistency that increases intensity, isn't it? Especially if you're driving behind them. But in my own life, I've found that I set out to try to improve my fitness, but I wasn't consistent in the way that I did that. And I realized I wasn't getting success because of that lack of consistency. So now I try to do the same things each day, with an odd day here and there that I maybe let myself go, but the consistency has produced greater results. So now we're going to apply that same principle to communication for today's episode. And I've got 6 different things that are advantages of consistency in your communication with your team, as well as with your customers. The first advantage is that it builds trust, because if you're saying the same thing consistently from week to week, day to day, then people begin to trust you because you're not changing your tune constantly. And the way we cultivate consistency that builds trust is by having regular communication schedules, maybe a weekly meeting, or I know of some remote work companies who have a daily 5-minute stand-up. And then they have a weekly team meeting together. If you build that regular schedule together, then you can develop that consistency that builds trust with your team, but also builds trust with those that you're serving. The second advantage of consistency is that it reduces confusion. You know, if you've ever been in a setting where the message changes day by day, there's confusion results because there isn't that consistency of communication. And when leaders communicate consistently, it reduces misunderstanding. It reduces confusion about expectations and goals. Now, the way we cultivate this to reduce confusion is there's got to be clear and documented communication. Something like a style guide, if you're in that kind of business where we're all using the same typography or the same logos or the same colors. That kind of consistency really brings clarity and reduces confusion. The third area that consistency can bring is that it enhances team cohesion. If your team are hearing the same stuff regularly, and if they're able then to bring their shared understandings together, then that enhances team cohesion. And you find you're all playing on the same field, playing in the same direction, and then the results are much greater. The way we cultivate team cohesion is regular team meetings. That reinforces our core values. It reinforces our focus on our goals. And if we regularly revisit those in those team meetings, then that really keeps them front of mind, and team cohesion grows as a result. Number 4 would be that consistency in communication really increases engagement. This applies to your customers and your clients as much as to your team. Because when team members know what to expect from their leaders, then they feel more secure and more engaged. And when your customers or clients know that you have a consistent message as a business, they're more likely to return with further business. The way to increase engagement in your consistency is to encourage feedback. Because everybody who's engaging with you has a view of what you're doing and they have an opinion on whether it's working or not. So creating these feedback loops where people can share what they see and what they hear, can give their input and then see you make adjustments based on that feedback, that is where the increased engagement really begins to pay off. We're going to do a future episode on feedback. So if you've got questions around the area of feedback, send them in to me so I can answer them in that episode. Number 5, consistency in communication really improves accountability. Because when there's clear expectation and clarification of responsibilities, then we can hold team members accountable for their roles and for their performance. And the cultivation for this value would be that we regularly review and reinforce individuals' and teams' responsibilities in our team meetings, but also in any written communication or in our regular reviews. The way to catch people in a helpful way is to catch them doing something right. If I'm always correcting what they're doing wrong, that doesn't have as much power. But every time I catch someone doing something right, it reinforces accountability and it improves the performance in those areas. So affirm people and celebrate when they get things right. Affirmation and celebration are far more powerful than correction in any form of teamwork. And the final area where consistency in communication really makes a difference is that it supports change management. Any team has to go through changes. There's always a challenge to be addressed. But during times of change, consistent communication really helps to manage uncertainty. It helps to reduce the strain of the transition. It guides the team through smoothly. The way we cultivate that is to develop a communication plan for the change that's in view, for the transition that's happening. And when there are regular updates to that plan and the team get to ask their questions around those updates, that reinforces the change management perspective in the consistency of your communication. And so we'll also be doing a future episode on change and transition. If you've got questions in that area, send them in as well. But by cultivating these 6 different practices, by focusing on these 6 advantages of consistency, leaders can increase their effectiveness with their teams, and teams can increase their effectiveness toward their goals. So that's why consistency in the end leads to a more effective and more harmonious work environment. And your communication mastery really matters to me. That's why I do what I do. So you can ask me any question and I'll be glad to address it in a future episode. You can reach me at my website at markburlinson.com and click on the Contact Me link so that you can send in those questions. I'll answer them at a future date. So would you help me now as we close out for this week? Help someone else at the same time. Think of somebody who needs to hear what you've just heard. Somebody who's developing consistency or who wants to address consistency in their workplace. Text them now with the link to this episode and say, hey, I think this will help you. They'll be grateful to you, and I'll be grateful because I'll gain a new listener or a new viewer. So thank you for your help. We'll be back next Monday with more of the Communication Mastery podcast. But for now, text that friend, give them the link so that they can join us on the journey. I'll see you next week.